The message came through every screen on Earth at the same time, and it did not matter what language someone spoke because the translation was automatic and perfect, and everyone understood exactly what was being said. The Calthrine Consortium spoke for 47 different alien civilizations, and they had a simple demand for humanity. Earth had 30 days to give up all claims to space beyond their moon, and they had to shut down every military base and weapon system and accept that they would never leave their solar system again. If humanity refused, then the aliens would come with their fleets and make them obey by force. Jake Morrison stood in the command center deep under the Colorado mountains and watched the alien message play over and over on the wall screens. Around him were generals and admirals from every nation on Earth, and most of them looked worried or scared. Jake felt something different stirring in his chest, and it took him a moment to recognize what it was. He was excited. He was actually excited that someone had finally given humanity a real challenge. Lisa Hayes stood next to him with her arms crossed, and she was smiling just a little bit. She was a colonel in the Space Defense Force, and she had spent 20 years preparing for exactly this kind of situation. She leaned over and whispered to Jake so only he could hear. "They think we are going to just surrender without a fight, and they have no idea what they just started." Admiral Stone sat at the head of the conference table, and his weathered face showed no fear at all. He had fought in 3 different wars before humanity ever got into space, and he knew exactly what this moment meant. He looked around at all the worried faces, and then he started to smile too. "Gentlemen and ladies, we have been ready for this day since we first learned we were not alone in the universe, and every training, exercise, and every battle simulation has been preparing us for exactly this moment. The aliens think they can scare us into submission, but they are about to learn something very important about humanity." The president appeared on the main screen from the White House Situation Room. Victoria Lang had been elected because she was tough and smart, and she had promised that Earth would never bow to anyone. Her face was serious, but her eyes were bright and determined. "Admiral Stone and Commander Morrison, I am ordering full military mobilization right now, and I want every ship we have ready to fight within 72 hours. If these aliens want a war, then we will give them one they will remember for the rest of their history. We have spent thousands of years learning how to fight, and now we finally have an enemy that is not ourselves." Jake felt his heartbeat slow down and steady the way it always did before combat. Humanity had been fighting wars for its entire existence, and every nation and every culture had contributed something to the art of warfare. They had learned tactics from ancient battles and strategy from modern conflicts, and they had refined everything through countless simulations and exercises. The aliens had been at peace for 300 years. Humanity had never known peace for more than a few decades at a time. That difference was about to matter more than the consortium could possibly understand. The command center burst into organized chaos as officers began coordinating with military bases around the world and in orbit. Space stations that had been disguised as research facilities suddenly revealed weapons systems that had been hidden in plain sight. Shipyards that were supposedly building cargo vessels opened up to show warships that had been under construction for years. Asteroid mining operations in the belt suddenly activated point defense systems and missile batteries. Earth had been preparing for this possibility ever since the first contact with alien life, and now, all that preparation was about to pay off. Colonel Hayes pulled up tactical displays showing the deployment of Earth's fleet. "We have 43 major warships ready for immediate deployment, and another 100 smaller vessels that can be armed and ready within 48 hours. The aliens probably think we only have a few primitive ships, but they are going to be very surprised." Every major nation on Earth had contributed ships and weapons and personnel to the unified defense force. The old rivalries and competitions had been set aside when humanity realized they might need to fight together against an outside threat. Now that threat was here, and humanity was more united than it had ever been in its entire history. Jake Morrison walked over to the strategic planning section, where officers were already running battle simulations based on what little they knew about consortium military technology. The aliens used energy shields and plasma weapons, and their ships were fast and maneuverable. But they had never faced kinetic weapons fired at relativistic speeds, and they had never encountered nuclear missiles that could be guided by human pilots willing to fly right into enemy formations. The simulations were showing that Earth had a real chance of winning if they fought smart and used every dirty trick they had learned over thousands of years of warfare. Admiral Stone called for attention and the room went quiet. I want everyone to understand something very important about what is about to happen. The consortium thinks they are facing a primitive species that barely knows how to leave its own planet. They think we will be easy to defeat or intimidate. They are wrong. We have been practicing warfare since before we had written language. We have studied every battle, and every tactic, and every strategy from our entire history. We know how to fight in space, because we learned how to fight in every other environment first. The aliens are about to learn that picking a fight with humanity is the worst mistake they could possibly make. The orders went out across the planet, and into space. Military personnel reported to their stations and civilian populations were briefed on emergency procedures. Manufacturing facilities switched to war production and began turning out ammunition and spare parts around the clock. Scientists and engineers worked on last-minute upgrades to weapons and defense systems. Everyone on Earth knew what was coming, and nobody was running away or hiding. Humanity was standing up and getting ready to fight. Jake Morrison checked his personal communicator and saw messages from his old squadron. They were all excited and ready, and none of them showed any fear. They had trained together for years, and they trusted each other completely. They knew the odds, and they knew the risks. But they also knew that they were the best pilots humanity had ever produced. The aliens might have better technology, but humans had better instincts and reflexes, and most importantly, they had the will to win, no matter what it cost. The countdown had started and Earth had 30 days before the consortium fleet would arrive. But humanity was not going to wait for the aliens to attack first. They were going to take the fight to the enemy and show the galaxy exactly what humans were capable of when someone threatened their home. 3 weeks passed, and the alien fleet appeared exactly when they said they would, at the edge of Earth's solar system, near Neptune's orbit. 200 warships came out of faster-than-light travel, in perfect formation. And they looked magnificent and terrifying with their gleaming hulls and advanced technology. Each ship was larger than anything humanity had built, and their weapons were already charging, and their shields were already active. The consortium had sent a message with their arrival, and the message was simple: surrender now or be destroyed. Greg Turner commanded the Earth destroyer called Relentless, and his ship looked rough and ugly compared to the beautiful alien vessels. It had been built in orbit around Mars, using materials from the asteroid belt, and it had armor plating bolted on wherever it would fit. The crew compartments were cramped, and the weapons systems had been upgraded so many times that nobody was quite sure how everything worked together anymore. But the ship was tough and reliable, and most importantly, it was crewed by 80 men and women who knew exactly what they were doing. Amy Brooks sat at the communications station and listened to the alien surrender demand repeat itself over and over. She was young, and this was her first real combat assignment. But she had trained for 4 years at the Naval Academy, and she was ready. Captain Turner, we are receiving the standard ultimatum message and they want a response within 10 minutes. Greg looked around at his bridge crew and saw that everyone was calm and focused. Send them a reply and tell them that we received their message, and our answer is that they can come and try to take what they want from us. The alien response came fast, and 3 of their cruisers broke formation and accelerated toward the Relentless at high speed. Their shields were glowing bright, and their plasma cannons were warming up for firing. The consortium commanders had decided to make an example of the human ship, and they expected it would be destroyed within minutes. They did not understand that humans had been fighting with projectile weapons for thousands of years, and had gotten incredibly good at hitting targets at long range. Ryan Clark was the tactical officer, and he watched the enemy ships approach on his display. All weapons ready, Captain. And we have firing solutions locked on all 3 targets. Greg waited and let the aliens get closer, because he wanted to make sure the first shots counted. The bridge was quiet, except for the hum of the engines and the soft beeping of the sensor systems. Nobody was scared, and nobody was nervous, because they all knew what was about to happen. Fire when ready, Mr. Clark. The Relentless fired its main railguns, and the tungsten projectiles left the ship at a significant fraction of light speed. The aliens had shields that could deflect or absorb energy weapons like lasers and plasma, but they had no defense at all against solid metal moving at incredible velocity. The first projectile hit the lead cruiser right in the center and punched through the shield like it was not even there. The impact released so much kinetic energy that it tore the ship apart from the inside, and secondary explosions ripped through the hull. The cruiser broke into 3 large pieces and dozens of smaller fragments, and the debris field spread out across thousands of kilometers. The second alien cruiser tried to dodge, but the human targeting computers had predicted its movement, and the railgun rounds caught it along its flank. Multiple impacts shredded the armor and destroyed critical systems, and the ship started tumbling out of control. The third cruiser actually managed to fire its plasma cannons, but the Relentless had already changed position using maneuvering thrusters that made the ship dance like a fighter despite its size. The plasma bolts passed through empty space, where the human ship had been just seconds before. Ryan Clark launched a spread of 6 missiles at the third cruiser, and each missile had a nuclear warhead. The aliens tried to shoot down the missiles with their point defense systems, but humans had designed the missiles to be small and fast and hard to hit. 3 missiles got through and detonated within a few hundred meters of the target. The explosions overlapped and created a brief new sun that burned away the alien shields and melted through the armor. When the light faded, the third cruiser was gone. All across the outer solar system, similar battles were happening as human ships engaged the consortium fleet. The aliens had expected an easy fight, but instead they found themselves facing an enemy that fought in ways they had never encountered before. Human vessels appeared from behind asteroids where they had been hiding and launched surprise attacks. Fighter squadrons came screaming out of nowhere and targeted shield generators and sensor arrays. Submarines that had been built for space combat moved silently through the debris fields and fired torpedoes at point-blank range. Admiral Stone watched the battle unfold from Command Center on Earth, and he felt a grim satisfaction as the tactical display showed alien ships being destroyed one after another. Send a message to all human vessels and tell them to maintain pressure, but do not pursue beyond the designated engagement zones. We want the aliens to retreat, so they can go back and tell their leaders what happened here today. Sophie Grant flew her interceptor through the chaos of battle with her squadron following close behind. She had been a test pilot before joining the military, and she knew how to push her craft to its absolute limits. The human fighters were smaller and faster than anything the aliens had, and they could pull maneuvers that would have killed most species. Sophie led her squadron straight at an alien destroyer that was trying to reform with other ships. Break an attack pattern Delta, and remember to save some missiles for the trip home. The 15 human fighters split into 3 groups and came at the alien destroyer from different angles. The enemy point defense systems tried to track them, but there were too many targets moving too fast. Sophie fired 2 missiles at the shield generator she had marked on her display and pulled up hard to avoid the return fire. Both missiles hit, and the local shield section flickered and died. Her wingman, Ben Cooper, came right behind her and fired a spread of armor-piercing rounds into the gap. The rounds penetrated deep into the ship and found something critical because the destroyer suddenly broke in half and began venting atmosphere and debris. The battle lasted for 6 hours, and when it was over, the consortium had lost 93 ships. Earth had lost 12 vessels and 240 personnel. It was a tremendous victory, but nobody was celebrating because they knew this was just the beginning. The surviving alien ships retreated beyond the orbit of Pluto and started broadcasting urgent messages back to their home systems. Admiral Stone knew those messages would bring more ships and more weapons, but he also knew that Earth had sent a clear message of their own. Humanity would not surrender, and they would not be easy to defeat. Greg Turner stood on the bridge of the Relentless and looked at the debris field that surrounded his ship. His crew had performed perfectly, and the ship had taken only minor damage. Amy Brooks was already compiling a report on everything that had happened, and Ryan Clark was supervising repairs to one of the railgun systems. Everyone was tired, but they were also proud of what they had accomplished. "Captain, we are receiving new orders from Fleet Command, and they want us to maintain position and help rescue survivors from the damaged ships." Greg nodded and gave the orders. Humanity had proven they could fight, but now they would show that they also knew mercy. The consortium made a mistake when they tried to regroup their remaining fleet at a position they thought was safe beyond Pluto's orbit. They established defensive positions and brought their ships into tight formations, and waited for reinforcements from their home systems. The alien commanders still did not understand what they were facing. They thought the first battle had been a fluke, or perhaps they had underestimated human weapons technology. They did not realize that humans had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of asymmetric warfare and surprise attacks. Sophie Grant was now commanding a full wing of interceptors, and her promotion had come through just hours after the first battle. She sat in the briefing room aboard the carrier Defiant, with 30 other pilots, and they were all listening to the mission parameters. Intelligence had located the consortium command carrier at the center of their defensive formation, and the mission was to penetrate that formation and disable the command ship. It was a dangerous assignment, and everyone in the room knew some of them probably would not come back. The plan was simple in concept but difficult in execution. The interceptor wing would approach from multiple angles, using the outer planets and their moons for cover. They would stay silent and dark until the last possible moment, and then they would hit the defensive perimeter at maximum speed. Once through the perimeter, they would target the command carrier's shield generators and communications arrays. The goal was not to destroy the ship, but to isolate it and leave it blind and unable to coordinate the consortium fleet. Ben Cooper sat next to Sophie and checked his equipment for the third time. He was nervous, but he trusted Sophie completely, and he knew the rest of the squadron felt the same way. She had proven herself in the first battle, and she had a gift for thinking 3 moves ahead of the enemy. Sophie looked around at her pilots and gave them a confident smile. "We have trained for this kind of mission 100 times, and we know what we are doing, and the aliens have no idea we are coming, so we have the advantage of surprise. Stay focused, and stay flexible, and watch each other's backs, and we will all get home safely." The interceptors launched from the Defiant in complete radio silence, and spread out across 1,000,000 cubic kilometers of space. Each pilot flew alone in the darkness, with only their instruments and their training to guide them. Sophie guided her fighter around one of Pluto's moons and adjusted her trajectory to bring her in on the command carrier from an unexpected angle. Her sensors showed other members of her wing taking up their assigned positions. Everything was going according to plan. The aliens did not detect the approaching fighters until it was too late. The human interceptors came in fast and low relative to the plane of the consortium formation, and they lit up their engines only in the final seconds before attack. Sophie fired her missiles at 2 shield generator nodes she had identified, and watched them streak away toward the massive command carrier. All around her, the other pilots were doing the same, and suddenly the space around the alien ship was full of explosions and debris. The consortium point defense systems tried to respond, but they were oriented outward, expecting attacks from long range. The human fighters were already inside the defensive perimeter, and moving too fast for the tracking systems to lock on effectively. Sophie pulled her interceptor through a tight loop that pushed her right to the edge of consciousness and came around for another pass. Her second spread of missiles took out a communications array, and she saw Ben Cooper's fighter destroy another one on the opposite side of the ship. The command carrier was huge and powerful, but it was designed to coordinate fleet actions from a safe distance. It was not built to defend against close-range fighter attacks. Within 10 minutes, the ship had lost all of its long-range communications and half of its shield generators. The consortium admiral tried to retreat, but human torpedoes from submarines that had been lurking in the area disabled the main engines. The command ship was effectively dead in space. On Earth, the ground defense forces were dealing with a different kind of threat. A group of consortium dropships had tried to bypass the space battle and head straight for population centers. Danny Foster was a major in the Planetary Defense Corps, and he commanded a network of hidden weapons platforms scattered across North America. His job was to make sure no alien soldiers ever set foot on Earth soil. Kate Murphy was his senior fire control officer, and she tracked the incoming dropships on her display. "We have 12 targets entering the atmosphere over the Atlantic, and their trajectory suggests they are heading for the eastern seaboard." Danny pulled up the defense grid and highlighted the weapons platforms that had the best firing solutions. "Activate stations 7 through 14 and prepare to fire on my command. Let them get deeper into the atmosphere where they cannot maneuver effectively." The dropships came down through the clouds, expecting to find primitive defenses, or perhaps no defenses at all. Instead, they ran into a wall of electromagnetic pulse weapons that had been developed from decades of anti-missile research. The pulses scrambled the alien control systems and sent the dropships tumbling out of control. As they fell, conventional artillery and surface-to-air missiles finished the job. Not a single alien soldier survived to reach the ground. Similar scenarios played out across the planet as the consortium tried and failed to find a weakness in Earth's defenses. Every attempt was met with overwhelming force and tactical surprise. The aliens had superior technology, but humans had superior strategy and tactical flexibility. They had learned through painful experience that technology alone never won wars. Wars were won by the side that could adapt faster and think more creatively and accept heavier losses without breaking. Nina Lawson commanded a stealth frigate called Phantom, and her mission was to show the consortium that nowhere was safe. Her ship had been designed specifically for deep penetration raids, and it could hide from most sensors by using a combination of advanced materials and heat management systems. She took the Phantom through the consortium defensive perimeter without being detected and positioned herself directly beneath one of their battleships. The alien vessel had its shields oriented forward and upward to protect against the human fleet it knew was out there. The shields underneath were weaker because the consortium had never encountered an enemy that would attack from below. Nina waited until her weapons officer confirmed target lock, and then she gave the order to fire. 6 armor-piercing torpedoes launched from point-blank range and slammed into the battleship's engineering section. The explosions tore through multiple decks and destroyed the main reactor containment. The battleship died before its crew even knew they were under attack. The Phantom jumped back into faster-than-light travel before the debris had stopped expanding. Nina allowed herself a small smile of satisfaction. The mission had been a complete success, and her crew had performed perfectly. She knew that similar raids were happening all across the consortium defensive positions. Human ships were appearing and disappearing like ghosts, and each attack left the aliens more confused and demoralized. Admiral Stone reviewed the battle reports from the last 48 hours and felt cautiously optimistic. The consortium had lost another 30 ships, and they had gained nothing in return. More importantly, the alien commanders were starting to make mistakes born of frustration and fear. They were pulling ships out of defensive positions to chase human raiders, and that left gaps that other human ships exploited. The enemy was losing cohesion, and that meant they were losing the war. But Stone knew this was not over yet. The consortium was huge and powerful, and they had resources that Earth could not match in a long campaign. The key was to end this quickly and decisively, before the aliens could bring their full weight to bear. He called his staff together and began planning the next phase. We have proven we can defend ourselves, and we have proven we can hurt them. But now we need to take the fight to their home systems and force them to surrender before this turns into a war of attrition that we cannot win. 2 months had passed since the war began, and the consortium held an emergency council meeting to discuss their complete failure to defeat or intimidate humanity. Of the 200 ships they had sent to Earth, only 57 remained operational. Their command structure was in chaos, and their military doctrine had been proven completely inadequate against human tactics. The council members argued and blamed each other, but nobody had a solution to the fundamental problem. Humans fought in ways that made no sense to species that had known peace for centuries. Pete Bradley was a colonel in military intelligence, and he sat across from a captured consortium officer in an interrogation room aboard the orbital station Guardian. The alien's name was something that translated roughly as Zarthek, and he had commanded a cruiser squadron before his ship was disabled and boarded. Pete had spent weeks talking to Zarthek and learning everything he could about consortium military thinking. Now, he was starting to understand why the aliens were losing so badly. Zarthek looked tired and defeated as he answered Pete's questions. Your species is completely insane, and I mean that as an observation, not an insult. We studied your history and your culture, and we saw that you were divided into hundreds of different nations and groups. We thought that division made you weak. We did not understand that every one of those divisions had spent centuries learning how to fight all the others. You are not one military force. You are thousands of military traditions, all working together. Pete nodded and offered the alien some water. That is exactly right, and the consortium made the mistake of thinking we were primitive because we still had conflicts among ourselves. But those conflicts taught us everything we know about warfare. Every nation on Earth contributed something unique to our combined forces. The Russians taught us how to absorb punishment and keep fighting. The Americans taught us about logistics and force projection. The Chinese taught us about patience and long-term strategy. The Europeans taught us about combined arms coordination. We learned from everyone, and we put it all together into something greater than the sum of its parts. Meanwhile, General Claire Watson was preparing the largest human military operation in history. She commanded 3 full-carrier battle groups, plus supporting cruisers and destroyers. The fleet consisted of 73 warships, crewed by over 15,000 personnel. Their mission was to strike directly at 3 major consortium military installations in their home systems. It was an incredibly risky plan, but Watson knew that Earth could not win a defensive war. They had to take the offensive and break the enemy's will to fight. Owen Martinez was her communications officer, and he coordinated with the squadron commanders to make sure everyone understood the plan. Each battle group would jump simultaneously to their assigned target, and they would have exactly 6 hours to complete their mission before retreating. The goal was not to occupy territory but to destroy the consortium's ability to wage offensive war. They would hit shipyards and supply depots and command stations. They would show the aliens that Earth could strike anywhere at any time. The fleet jumped into faster-than-light travel and crossed hundreds of light-years in a matter of hours. When they emerged, they were deep in consortium space, far from Earth, and surrounded by enemy territory. But they had achieved complete surprise, because the aliens never imagined that humans would be bold enough, or crazy enough, to attack their home systems. Claire Watson stood on the bridge of her flagship and watched as her battle groups spread out to attack their assigned targets. The consortium shipyards at Beta Centauri were massive structures that could build a dozen warships simultaneously. They represented years of construction and billions of credits in investment. The human attack came without warning, as 20 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel within weapons range. The shipyard defenses tried to respond, but they were designed to resist pirate raids, not full-scale military assault. Within 2 hours, the shipyards were burning ruins, drifting in orbit. At another star system, a supply depot that served as the logistics hub for an entire sector came under attack. The human ships methodically destroyed fuel storage tanks and ammunition bunkers and spare parts warehouses. The explosions were visible from the planet below, and the civilian population watched in shock as their supposedly invincible military infrastructure was torn apart by the upstart species from Earth. The third target was a command and control station that coordinated consortium fleet movements across a dozen systems. It was heavily defended, with static weapons platforms and a garrison of 20 warships. But the human attack was so fierce and so sudden that the defenders never had a chance to organize an effective response. The station's shields failed under concentrated railgun bombardment, and nuclear missiles finished the job. The command staff evacuated, but the station itself was destroyed beyond any hope of repair. But Claire Watson had authorized something else alongside the military strikes. Valerie Ross commanded a team of information warfare specialists, and their mission was to hack into consortium communication networks. They broadcast a simple message to every world in the alien alliance. Earth does not want to conquer you or rule you. We only want to be left alone in peace. Withdraw your forces from our space, and we will withdraw ours. Continue this war, and we will bring the fighting to every system you control. The choice is yours. The message was accompanied by video footage of the recent battles showing human tactical superiority in undeniable detail. It also included casualty figures and economic damage estimates. The psychological impact was enormous. Consortium civilians had been told that humanity would be easily defeated. Now they were seeing their fleets destroyed and their infrastructure burning. Public opinion began to turn against the war. On Earth, President Victoria Lang addressed a joint session of the United Nations that was being broadcast across the planet and throughout human space. She spoke clearly and firmly about humanity's position. We did not start this war, and we did not want this war, but we will finish it on our terms. We have shown the galaxy what humans are capable of when we are threatened. We have proven that we will defend our freedom with everything we have, but we are also offering peace to any who will take it. We are not conquerors. We are defenders of our home and our future. The reaction from the consortium was slower than expected because their decision-making process required consensus among dozens of different species and governments. But cracks were beginning to show in the alliance. Some members argued for immediate peace negotiations, while others wanted to continue fighting until humanity was completely subjugated. The debate grew heated, and several species threatened to withdraw from the consortium entirely if the war continued. Greg Turner and the crew of the Relentless were part of the fleet that struck at Beta Centauri, and they had performed magnificently during the battle. Now, they were heading back to Earth along with the rest of the strike force. Amy Brooks monitored communications and listened to the chatter between ships. Everyone was tired but also exhilarated by what they had accomplished. They had taken the war to the enemy and proven that Earth could strike anywhere in the galaxy. Ryan Clark ran diagnostics on the weapon systems and made notes about what needed repair or replacement. The ship had taken some damage during the battle, but nothing critical. They would need a few weeks in space dock for proper repairs, but the Relentless was still combat-capable if needed. He looked over at Greg Turner and saw that the captain was lost in thought. "Sir, do you think they will surrender now, or do we have to keep fighting?" Greg was quiet for a moment before answering. "I think we hurt them badly enough that they will want to talk, but whether they actually surrender depends on how much pride they are willing to swallow. We showed them they cannot win, but some people need to learn that lesson more than once." Admiral Stone received regular updates from intelligence sources inside consortium space, and the news was encouraging. There were protests on several alien worlds demanding an end to the war. Some consortium military officers were openly questioning the wisdom of continuing the fight. Trade between member species had been disrupted, and the economic costs were mounting rapidly. Everything pointed toward a negotiated settlement within weeks or months rather than years of continued fighting. But Stone knew that the most dangerous moment in any war was when one side realized they were going to lose. Desperate enemies did desperate things. 3 weeks after the human strikes on consortium home systems, the aliens requested a formal ceasefire and peace negotiations. The message came through diplomatic channels that had been established early in the war, and it was addressed to President Victoria Lang personally. The tone was very different from the arrogant ultimatum that had started the conflict. Now the consortium was asking for talks rather than demanding surrender. It was a complete reversal, and everyone on Earth knew what it meant. Humanity had won. The treaty negotiations took place aboard the orbital station Unity, which had been built specifically for this purpose in neutral space between Earth and the nearest consortium system. The human delegation was led by Ambassador Tyler James, who had spent 30 years in diplomatic service and knew how to negotiate from a position of strength. With him was General Frank Morrison, who represented Earth's unified military command. They faced representatives from all 47 consortium species, and the contrast could not have been more striking. The aliens looked exhausted and defeated, while the humans looked confident and ready for whatever came next. Tyler James opened the negotiations with a simple statement that set the tone for everything that followed. "Earth did not seek this war, and we do not seek to continue it, but we will never again accept limitations on our freedom to explore and expand. We are willing to establish peaceful relations with the consortium based on mutual respect and recognition of our sovereignty. We will agree to clear territorial boundaries, and we will agree to non-aggression treaties, and we will even agree to joint trade and scientific cooperation. But we will never again be threatened or intimidated by anyone. Those are our terms, and they are not negotiable." The chief consortium diplomat was an elderly alien named Kelvar, who had been involved in galactic politics for longer than most humans had been alive. He looked at Tyler James with something that might have been respect or might have been fear. "Your species is very young and very aggressive, and you have proven to be far more dangerous than we anticipated. What guarantee can you give us that once you have rebuilt your forces, you will not turn to conquest? How do we know you will not become the threat that we feared you might be?" Tyler James did not hesitate before answering. "You do not need guarantees from us because our entire history is the guarantee. Humans have built empires and we have torn them down again. We have conquered other humans, and we have freed ourselves from conquest. We learned thousands of years ago that ruling other people is exhausting and ultimately self-defeating. We do not want to control you or govern you. We just want to live in peace, and explore the universe, and build our civilization. You attacked us, and we defended ourselves. Now, we are offering peace. Take it or leave it, but do not ever threaten us again. The negotiations took 2 weeks to finalize all the details, but the basic framework was agreed upon in the first few days. The consortium would formally recognize Earth's sovereignty and territorial claims out to a radius of 50 light-years from their home system. Both sides would establish embassies and trade missions. There would be joint scientific programs and cultural exchanges. Most importantly, there would be a mutual defense pact that committed both sides to peace for at least 50 years, with automatic renewal, unless either side gave formal notice of withdrawal. Sophie Grant had been promoted again, and now held the rank of lieutenant colonel. She was assigned to lead the first diplomatic mission to the consortium homeworld, and her ship carried not weapons but civilian engineers and scientists and teachers. Tim Hayes was her navigator, and he plotted the course that would take them deep into former enemy territory. It felt strange to be flying through space that just months ago had been a war zone. Now they were going as ambassadors rather than warriors. The consortium homeworld was beautiful, with blue oceans and green continents and cities that stretched across entire regions. Sophie brought her ship down to the designated landing area and saw thousands of aliens gathered to watch. Some looked curious and some looked fearful, but most just looked tired. The war had cost them far more than they had expected, and now they were ready for peace even if it meant accepting humans as equals rather than subjects. On Earth, construction crews were working around the clock, building the first joint research station that would orbit the moon. Kelly Peters was a civilian scientist, specializing in energy systems, and she supervised the installation of equipment alongside consortium scientists who had volunteered for the project. It was awkward at first because neither side quite trusted the other yet. But gradually, they found common ground in their shared curiosity and their mutual desire to learn. One of the alien scientists was named Mirakel, and she worked closely with Kelly on the fusion reactor project. We spent so much time preparing to fight you that we never considered what we could accomplish together. Your species has a gift for practical engineering while we have strong theoretical frameworks. Combining our knowledge could advance both civilizations by decades or more. Kelly smiled and agreed. War is easy because you just have to destroy things. Peace is harder because you have to build things. But building is a lot more satisfying in the long run. At the Earth Defense Force Academy in Colorado Springs, a new class of recruits sat in the auditorium listening to instructor Nathan Price lecture about the recent war. He was a veteran of the first battle, and he had earned a chest full of medals for his actions. But today, he was not talking about tactics or weapons. He was talking about the bigger picture and what the war had meant for humanity's place in the galaxy. Nathan looked out at the young faces in front of him and chose his words carefully. The consortium made one critical mistake that cost them everything. They judged us by how young our civilization was, rather than by what we had accomplished. They saw our internal conflicts and assumed we were weak and divided. They did not understand that every battle we fought and every war we waged made us stronger and taught us lessons that they had forgotten centuries ago. We won this war not because we were more violent or more aggressive, but because we understood something they did not. We understood that the purpose of military strength is to preserve peace, not to wage eternal war. A young cadet raised her hand with a question. Sir, do you think we will have to fight another war someday? Nathan considered his answer carefully, because he knew these young people were looking to him for guidance. Maybe we will and maybe we will not. The galaxy is huge, and we are still newcomers here. There are probably species out there that are more powerful than the consortium. But here is what I want all of you to remember. We did not win because we love fighting. We won because we are very good at it, and we are good at it because we have been practicing for 10,000 years. The best warriors are the ones who prefer peace because they understand the true cost of war. Admiral Stone retired from active service after the treaty was signed, and he spent his remaining years writing a comprehensive history of the war. He wanted future generations to understand not just what had happened, but why it had happened and what it meant. He sat in his study overlooking San Francisco Bay and worked on the final chapter about humanity's integration into galactic society. Jake Morrison and Lisa Hayes came to visit him one evening, and they shared drinks while watching the sunset over the Pacific Ocean. The news broadcasts showed human ships patrolling jointly with consortium vessels and former enemies working together to maintain peace. Trade was booming, and both sides were benefiting from shared technology and knowledge. It had only been 6 months since the war ended, but already it felt like ancient history. Lisa raised her glass in a toast. To the shortest war in human history, and to the longest peace we have ever known. Jake and Henry both drank to that, and then sat quietly for a few minutes watching the ships in orbit above them. Those vessels represented the combined strength of Earth's nations, working together toward a common purpose. They also represented something that had never existed before in human history: a genuine external threat that had forced humanity to unite completely. Henry Stone spoke quietly and thoughtfully. The consortium gave us a gift, even though they did not mean to. They gave us a reason to stop fighting each other and start working together. For the first time in our entire history, we stood as one species against an outside threat. That unity is what won the war. But it is also what will define our future. We can never go back to the old divisions and rivalries, because we have seen what we can accomplish when we work together. Across the galaxy, in the halls of the newly reformed Galactic Council, humanity took its seat for the first time alongside the consortium species. The other civilizations watched with mixed emotions of respect and caution and curiosity. The young species from Earth had proven themselves capable of incredible violence, but they had also shown mercy and offered genuine peace. Now they would have to prove themselves in the much more difficult arena of diplomacy and cooperation. The human representative was a career diplomat named Patricia Cole, and she understood that every word she spoke and every action she took would be analyzed and judged. She addressed the council with confidence, but also with humility. Earth comes to this council not as conquerors, but as partners. We have shown what we are capable of in war, but now we want to show what we can contribute in peace. We have technology and knowledge that we are willing to share. We have resources and energy that we are willing to commit to common projects. We ask only that we be treated as equals, and that our sovereignty be respected. The other species listened, and most seemed willing to accept humanity as a member of the galactic community. A few remained skeptical or fearful, but even they could not deny that Earth had earned its place through combat effectiveness and diplomatic skill. The vote was taken, and humanity was formally admitted to the Galactic Council with full rights and responsibilities. It was a historic moment, and everyone present knew they were witnessing the beginning of a new era. On Earth, celebrations broke out in every major city as people watched the council proceedings broadcast live. Humanity was no longer alone in the universe, and they were no longer the newcomers begging for acceptance. They had fought their way to the table, and now they had a voice in galactic affairs. It was a proud moment, but also a sobering one, because everyone understood that this was just the beginning. The galaxy was vast and ancient, and full of mysteries and dangers that humanity had not yet encountered. But if there was one thing that humans were good at, it was adapting to new challenges. They had turned warfare into a science over thousands of years of practice. Now they would turn peace into an art, and they would show the galaxy what else humanity was capable of achieving. The war was over, and the hard work of building a better future was just beginning.